just as a reference. So we had our meeting, I'm going to say October 8th, because that's what date is on the agenda. And I think we were a little bit rushed at the end of it. So if maybe my recommendation is to start our meeting off. So previous meeting, we had all the departments go through everything that's on the capital budget. But Ms. Fancy, I think, didn't have a full opportunity to kind of outline what that means and for the financial bottom line for the town of Drayton Valley. I know we spoke to it a little bit, but I don't think we really got the full clear picture on it. So I'm going to suggest that we start off from, okay, we've had a debrief on what each individual project is, and let's assume 100% we move forward with all of this. What does that mean for the town in terms of granting our debt limit in all of those scenarios? And then from there, maybe I'll open it up to council to ask questions on specific projects, because I was just looking for clarification on one or two of them. And then from there we can start figuring out if we want to debenture $10 million this year. So I'll turn it over to Ms. Fancy to touch on, I guess, the new papers that were handed out, probably page 3, which is a capital plan from 2020 to 2019, which has projected revenues as well as debt limits, and things of the like. So Ms. Fancy, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good afternoon, Mayor and councillors. To elaborate as to what Mr. Mayor was referring to, I will take you to the debt limit summary. And, well, you know, it would be worth for us to go back to this first page here, because we did make a change in 2020, let me see here. Oh. Where is it? Yes. So the second page, Capital Project 302, Phase 1 South Sanitary Trunk Twinning. Previously on the summary that you were provided, the capital plan you were provided, that project was allocated amongst 2 years. So we had 2.4 million per year. Upon speaking with Rick further to the progression of our project and when we foresee that it will be completed, it was better suited that we allocate the full amount to 2020, as we do anticipate that this will be done before the end of the year of 2020, rather than carrying that into 2 years. So then that will increase our bottom line here for our total capital projects by that differential. So we now have an increased capital project cost of $16,439,270. Carrying down from that, we have our Brazeau cost sharing as well as our Parkland cost sharing. The Aquatic Facility Reserve, we're recognizing that in 2020, that's when we anticipate construction will start, should we follow through. In 2020, we have our previously funded projects of $945, $949. In addition to that, we are recognizing a portion of our reserve that we had for the affordable housing, and that is for Cadence Court for the insulation repair. And that is for capital project 438. Further to that, we have our operating surplus available for capital. Now, that will be the surplus amount that we have available from our revenue less our expenses, less our committed debt that we already have for our debenture that we're currently have our payments for. Following down to that, we have our granting, and we will be recognizing our gas tax for 421,001, as well as the other granting awarded. This amount here, as I had mentioned at our last meeting, this is the amount that we have confirmed that we're receiving. As I had mentioned before, we have applied for about 14 million in grants for the 2020 year. However, we have not received confirmation as to if we have been awarded for those or not.
14, and we haven't received confirmation. We will receive confirmation over periods of months, and that's how that works. So just explain that a little bit to me. So if we're not blind, right? We are having to wait. This one will come through perhaps in this time. This one will come through in this MSI will come through at this time.
Yes.
So how long do we wait before we know these things?
Thank you, Councillor McGee. We are expecting them periodically. There is a, sorry, Winston, if you can elaborate on that one for the 2018 grant that was applied. When do we anticipate we'll be receiving? Yes, thank you.
So the grant that Jen has just been referring to is the ISEP grant that was applied for at the end of 2018, and that is for the Cell 6 Lagoon. And so that's about a touch of, it escapes me right now, just over $1 million. So should we get that, then that will alter this number for the better. We're expecting that to hear back by the end of this year. That's what we were told with a recent communication Rick had with the team at Alberta Transportation.
And in addition to that, for the ISIP grant in regards to the aquatic facility, we're expecting to know if we are eligible to go forward by the end of December. However, we will be confirming if we will be awarded or not by spring 2020. So we do anticipate that periodically throughout 2020, if we are awarded these funds, we will be receiving them throughout the year.
Mr. Mayor, then when it's sporadic like that, and it's a grant application that could come or not come, how do we factor that in, or do we factor it in, or do we just see that, gee, we got some extra money, but we can't factor that into the decisions that we make today, right?
Thank you, Mr. McGee. I agree. In regards to granting, we do consider the applications that we have put forward. However, when determining which projects we continue with first, it's important that we recognize the fact that we may not receive the funding, which would in fact then result into a debenture. If I may carry you back to the last page here, we were discussing the granting component, and this is for 2020. Our total that we have for granting will be $461,126. And before consideration of debentures, we're looking at a total commitment of $11,866,238. Further down to that, we have just over $2 million in debentures already recognized in our deferred that can be attributed towards our capital projects that we're considering for 2020. When we deduct that amount that we already have recognized in deferred, we would have to apply for a debenture of $9.8 million if we were to consider completing all of these projects in full during 2020. With that being said, I would like to touch on the component of the MSI funding. On the bottom of your sheet here, on the new one that you've been provided with today, you'll see 3 projects that were previously promised MSI funding to total $4,770,000. I think it's important that we consider that if we use this MSI funding for other initiatives, this means that we will have to debenture the $4,770,000. With that being said, if we were to not follow through with our intentions with the MSI funding, we could use that towards these projects, and then our debenture would decrease to $5,400,000 $524,008. So that will significantly take our debenture down to essentially almost half. I just think it's something that we should be considering when discussing which capital projects we will be following through with in 2020. I would like to touch on the trend that we have going back up to our total capital project costs. In 2020, we have $16,439,270, and our intentions for this 10-year plan is to, as we were working through the prior year capital budget, we're working through cash flow smoothing with the consideration of priorities. What we're trying to avoid is peaks and valleys in our financial commitments over the next 10 years. The 10-year trend, as you can see, for 2020 to 2022, they're slightly decreasing. This is with the consideration that in 2021, we may receive a portion of the ISIP grant. In my calculations, I did not pick up the full $7 million in the ISIP grant for 2021. We did a scenario based on the fact that we may receive 50%. That was with the intention that we consider other risks outside of not receiving the ISIP grant at all. So we agreed on a 50% scenario. Also in 2021, that is considering that we use our $4.3 million of MSI funding towards the aquatic facility. So you do see an additional just over $7 million there considered outside of our other funding.
How long is the MSI good for, the money? Like, how long can we carry that forward?
Thank you, Councillor Wheeler. The MSI capital can be carried forward. I cannot confirm the exact year and the duration of how long it can be carried forward. What I can comment on is that we had projects with committed funds from 2005, and those funds were still committed to those projects in 2019. I wouldn't 100% say it's indefinitely. However, I will say that it is certainly a longer duration of time. Yes. So I touched on the trend that we see here, and after 2022, we see it getting down to more of a lower level, more comfortable level of 5 million, 2 million, 3.8, and then furthering down. And this is this was part of our exercise in going through our capital budget from prior year, each line item ensuring that these projects that are listed are attainable, are still projected for us to proceed with, and ensuring that the value of these projects were appropriate. This has really helped with cash flow smoothing for the next 10 years for our capital plan. With that being said, I'll take you down to the debenture considerations and our projected new debentures. We've discussed 2020. Further to that, we have 2021. This debenture is significantly lower due to the $4.3 million in MSI that we've allocated, as well as the consideration of awarding $3.5 million from the ISIP grant. And this is due to the aquatic facility. For 2021, we anticipate a debenture of almost $7 million. This is due to mostly due to the aquatic facility commitment as well. And then furthering 2023, $1 million. I don't anticipate that we would have to debenture in 2024. The significance of the volume for this amount is possibly an allocation where we can defer a project or consider, make other considerations to avoid debenturing. I recommend that as well for 2026. So we have a debenture consideration of 326,000. However, I anticipate with some project planning that we can possibly avoid that debenture as well. You'll see in 2029, we have a significant debenture of 10 million. That's due to larger projects that have been allocated further out. Some of those are significant items such as the Civic Center replacement for 4 million and the 26th Avenue development capital project 254 for 7 million as well. With that being said, I'd like to carry you forward to the last page that you have for the debt limits. And our debt limits, so our debt limit is based on MGA standards of 1.5 of our projected revenues. As discussed, our projected revenues are based on, in 2020, that we revert back prior to our 10% rebate, our one-year rebate that we had offered in 2019. So essentially, our 2020 projected revenue is the 2018 projected revenue. 2020 is then the consideration of 2% inflation and forward. Our debt limit is our debt ceiling, and that is the amount of borrowing that we can consider. Well, we're up significantly, it's 60%, and that trend carries quite high for almost the next 10 years. In comparison to our prior year, we were at 35%, so essentially we're we're doubling, almost doubling our debt limit. I recommend in our best interest that we don't have a debt limit that high, as you exceed 40%, you're increasing your risks. In regards to the debt service, my apologies, that is the amount of cash flow that we have to commit to our payments. Again, in 2018, we were using 27% of our debt service, and with these changes, we've increased by 9% to 36%. And again, the trend is increasing slightly, and as our debentures taper off, it decreases. I had ran an analysis of our surrounding municipalities, and in 2018, we were at par with those. One being 33%, the other being 37% for their debt limits, and we were at 35%. So I think in comparison, we were at par 2018. However, with consideration of our intentions for 2020, I think 60% is too high. For the debt limit, 36% is quite high as well for this debt service.
Then in your opinion, what would you suggest not be done?
Thank you, Councillor Ballas. For consideration of what shouldn't be done, you're asking? I think, Winston, if you could actually elaborate on that as well, I'd appreciate your input. Thank you.
So Councillor Ballas, are you saying which project should not be considered, or is it what percentage should we not, what should that threshold be? I just wanted clarity on that, please.
So what is a comfortable debt limit percentage, in your opinion?
Thank you, Councillor Ballas. I would recommend a debt limit below 40%. And We were, in 2018, we were below that, we were 35%. I don't recommend the 60% debt limit.
Then to reach the objective of 40%, which projects on the capital side would you suggest be deferred?
But before we go there, should we not, let's dive down, and then, because that's the discussion. If we're gonna go to 60, it's gonna be this, and if we go to 36, it's gonna be this, and that's a decision that we have to make. We would look for their recommendations, but.
I just want to get some feedback from the administration. That's comfortable with you?
My suggestion is it's a little preemptive. Certainly, I do want feedback from administration, but I want to have council the ability to ask a few questions about this, because I have some questions first and foremost, and then once we had a chance to debate a little bit, I would then ask for administration's input on that. Councillor Gamana, do you have a? Yeah, because I have a number of questions that I would like to ask first, and then just to help me better understand before we move forward. So, if administration is prepared for questions. So I guess, moving past Councillor Ballas's question at this time, we'll revisit that in a moment. Ms. Fancy, did you have anything else you were looking to add before I turn it over for some questions for Council of Administration of this?
No, thank you, Mayor. I have no other additions at this time.
Okay, well, I'm going to kick off a few clarification questions, just for my own benefit. First one was on this project 302, which we now have budgeted for $4.8 million. My memory isn't perfect, but I remember we committed to moving forward with this project last year because we had significant amount of grant funding. I believe it was 70% grant funding. Just everything I see here doesn't reflect the fact that we have a significant amount of grant funding paying for that project. If you could just help me navigate through this to see what I'm missing, that would be greatly appreciated. My next question will be about MSI funding as well, so I don't know if there's any correlation between the two.
Thank you, Mayor. In regards to Project 302, the 4.8 million, I have confirmed that there is almost 1.3 million in MSI funding that was allocated to this project. In excess to that, I will have to do further research to confirm the exact amount of the grant funding that we will be expecting for the remainder of this project.
Okay, yeah, because my recollection from last year's budget meeting was that it's a no-brainer, because it's 70% grant funded, with the Brazeau County putting in some, and yeah, I don't see that here, which can throw off these numbers quite significantly. So secondly, I'm going to talk about MSI. So I see here under granting, so we have $0 for MSI for 2020. Okay, if that's the case, we have 4.3 in MSI funding for 2021, which I'm assuming is due to the allocation of MSI funding for the swimming pool. I'm pretty certain 4.3 isn't coming from us completely, because I don't think we have 4.3 to dedicate to that project. And am I incorrect in that? Because I remember seeing the agreement with the ISEP was, you know, the county coming with maybe 3, and I think there was a maximum that the town of Drayton Valley could actually approve to that, or were we able to move some things around? The 2005 money? Okay. Okay, so if that 4.3 is coming from, indeed, the town on MSI, the aquatic facility reserve. So is the 2021 expectation that we have here is the town's going to be funding the entirety of the project less $5 million from Brazeau County, is that correct? Is that what the assumption is made here? Without ISAP? I'm just making sure that's clarification.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, you're correct. The 4.3 million will be allocated to the aquatic facility for our contribution for the MSI, for the ISIP grant. And in addition to that, our aquatic facility reserve of 2,225,569 will be also contributing to that in 2021 as well.
Okay. And where is the $5 million from Brazeau County in this? Or are we under the assumption that they're not committing $5 million?
Just 1 second, I have it here.
Because I would have expected that under the Brazeau cost sharing for 2021, which is 1.94 million.
The total cost sharing. I think it's this right here. No, it's included in here. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The contribution from Brazeau County is included in the Brazeau cost sharing, inclusive within the 6.6 million that we have here. Because they are contributing 4.9 of their, 4.3 of their, I'll have to double check.
Yeah.
Their MSI funding, and in addition to that, they will be contributing 1.1 million outside of their MSI funding.
So,
But it still come to us,
That's correct.
so then we need to put the full 5 million.
yes. So I mean, if they're looking at contributing MSI, regardless of how they allocate it, it will be $5 million coming to us. So I'm just going to, unless we, yeah, so we have the full $18.5 million on this budget for the pool. Or, okay, actually so under the Brazeau cost sharing, so we have 1.9 the first year, 1.67 the second year, and 2.4 in 2023. Are all 3 of those line items related to the $5 million spread over 3 years?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, you are correct. The total cost share for the aquatic facility from Brazeau County is a component of those 3 numbers. So it's the 1.3 million per year. So for their MSI funding, that will equal 3.9 million. In addition to that, the remaining commitment of 1.1 million divided amongst 3 years during the duration of our project, which is 366, 666, which will then total the 1.1 million. So we have our total MSI funding from Brazeau County of 3.9 million and our additional commitment of 1.1 million equaling the 5 million.
Okay.
When you add that amount, 5 million, to the additional Brazeau County capital contributions for our projects, you will then equal the 6.6 million that you see on your capital plan.
Okay. So we've spread their contribution over 3 years, whereas in 2021, we're committing the full allocation of our portion for the pool. Is that what I'm seeing?
Yes, you are correct.
Okay. You can ask the question if you want.
What would the purpose be of spreading it over the 3 years?
Thank you, Councillor Ballas. The intention of spreading it across 3 years was to smooth the cash flow of the costs attributing to the percentage of completion of the project. In regards to picking up our MSI for ourselves in the 1 year, as well as the ISIP grant, was a demonstration to explain how we will have to future fund our other projects. Would you prefer to see the MSI and the ISIP grant allocated amongst 3 years as well?
I'm so confused, I don't know.
Okay.
Well, Mr. Mayor, the issue I think that we're going to be faced with is at 60%, which you don't recommend. Your recommendation is 36% or 40 at best. So somewhere we're going to need to get there. So if it's creative financing, then that's helpful. If it's not, if it actually means this, and this will not be done, then we can have that discussion. Or there's a creative way to look at it. I don't have a better way to say that.
Yeah. So you kind of touched on the point, Councillor McGee, is if we move forward with the plan as presented, our debt limits are going to be significantly higher than administration's recommendation for us. And so, I mean, if we're looking at, we'd essentially have to cut probably 80% of the capital budget for 2020 in order to stay in that debt limit. So, I mean, ultimately, these are just numbers on a page, and these would be considered, I guess, worst-case scenario, and this is based on the fact that we move forward with building the pool if we only receive $3.5 million of ISEP grants, which, I mean, we can either put it in there as 7 million or 0. I don't know if 50% is a reasonable amount. It's probably going to be all or nothing. And so I guess the first conversation I think has to be had is if we're willing to commit 100% to building the pool starting next year, regardless of what grant dollars come in, because that's going to have a significant impact on 3 of the projects that are outlined for this upcoming year of 4.7. And if we move those MSI dollars to build a pool, we have to do a significant amount of cutting from our capital budget unless we want to take on a significant amount of debt. So that's kind of, that's how I look at it as step one being is really it comes full circle back to the swimming pool of how committed we are. I know we can all sit in meetings and say we're 100% committed, and then we start looking at the fiscal realities of it, and then we become less committed. So here's the financial realities. So maybe we'll just have a quick conversation on that, Councillor Wheeler.
Yeah, I understand wanting to keep our debt limit low as possible, like ideally, 0 would be nice. But we're always gonna have to borrow for projects, and I think being a municipality, when we build capital projects, we only do it once every 10-ish years, there's gonna be those spikes. And it's gonna be a 60%. There's no way we could build a new fire hall, or build a new library, or build a new pool, or build a new town office, or any of those type of projects without seeing those kind of spikes. And I think it's prudent that we're long-term planning for the 10 years to make sure we don't have 3 spikes at the same time, because we absolutely can't afford that. But for me, when we look at what our community wants, if we're planning out for the 10 years or 20 years out, I'm comfortable borrowing that type of money for these projects. Otherwise, these projects aren't going to happen. And I also think when we talk about, for me, with the MSI dollars, is that at the end of the day, if we've tied them up right now in our pool project, and for some reason, if it doesn't move forward, and we do borrow for the road projects that were on there, it's just a reverse at the end, because we were going to borrow for the pool. So if the pool moves forward, then we're not borrowing for the pool, we're using the MSI dollars. Either way, we get $5 from the government, and we have to put our own 5 in, and whether we go like this or go like this, it's the same thing. If there's no expiration of the MSI dollars, which is why I was asking earlier, so I don't see it as a problem.
I mean, obviously, I appreciate administration putting a 10-year plan together, but I think it'd be a little bit foolhardy to suggest that in 2028, there's only going to be $850,000 worth of capital projects. I'm sure if you go back to 2009, you probably 2020, there's going to be like, I don't know, like $500,000 worth of capital projects, and here we are sitting at $16,500,000. You don't know what the costs are going to be generally until you're forced to make those decisions. And so the fact that we have, in the next 3 years, we're looking at nearly $40 million in capital projects, but then 8 years from now, $850,000 lends me to believe that that might change.
Maybe just, Mr. Mayor, to help you and council go back, when you look at the 850,000, we have 100 and it used to be 170, is now 130 under item 366. That is going to determine the capital that will fall into that placeholder. So you're going to have some water, sewage, capital projects. So yes, as much as it looked like 850, it looks laughable right now, but that is the reason why it's at 850. That's the reality of today that we know. The 130, the works that we're going to do there to know what our infrastructure state is like and when that should be rolled out will impact that 850 and beyond. So
Yeah, and that's my concern is, we can look at this year and debenture a significant amount and all great projects that need to be done and will be the betterment of the community, and it will reduce the expenditures in the future, but the next council's hands will be tied significantly by these decisions, and whether or not their priorities line up with ours, I'm not sure. But I mean, to that extent, it's all capital projects that, the new landfill, that's probably going to have to be done before we run out of space. Rebuilding the road. Speaking of which, capital project 244, wasn't that allocated for the 2019 budget? Or is that?
that's a 2019. Can't carry over to 2020 for completion. So it's already budgeted. Those come out.
So where is that reflected in our page 2, bottom half, under funding, operating, granting? Is it under debenture consideration? Is that where?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If you refer to the second page, you'll see under operating previously funded, that amount is $945,949. That is due to, as we were working through our 2019 projects and our actual year-to-date expenditures, versus, I guess, in consideration to what we need to, the funding needed to finish the project, I had prepared an analysis of all of our projects that we have started, the actual year-to-date expenses, any change orders considering the increase in the value of those projects, and that amount had netted out to the 950,000.
So it netted out to 945, so does that mean we still have another 1.887 million to spend for the 62nd Street? And, so what was I remember that came to council because it came over budget significantly. What was that number, 2.1 million or 2.3? Yeah, just 2.3. 2.3. So we've spent, I guess, just over $400,000 on that project.
There will be another progress draw that will come in for end of October, and if the weather permits, up to end of November. So the conversation we had this morning was the 1.8 will most likely be reduced before the year end because of upcoming progress statements. Then that will then add to the 945, 949.
So that number would then be reduced
That's correct.
as well.
Yep.
Okay. Councillor Peebles?
So just to make sure I'm rolling with y'all on this very boring day called budget. All the carryover, we approved that in 2019. It was budgeted into our budget, right? With the 10% reduction. So are you telling me all the number amounts to say CO, those carryovers aren't actually included in this because we've already allotted money last year? Or how is this working? Because I'm looking at the debenture, I'm looking at the numbers. If I just did like a few little numbers, if anything that was carryover, and then some of the projects that I actually thought we're gonna get to, it was like $6 million, not 16 million. So is there, if that's money that we've already allotted, then I don't wanna budget it again, that's what I'm thinking.
Yes. I'm gonna just see if I can. Is it gonna throw us off our trajectory? I don't know what trajectory we're necessarily on, hence why I don't want to be knocked off of it. Councillor Wheeler has a quick question for the fire department.
Yeah, Tom, with the 4 projects you have on here, they're all cost shared with the county? Okay. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Gamana? I'm letting administration deliberate. Okay.
So,
So wait, can I just call a 5-minute break?
okay, sure.
Order. And after conversation with Mr. Russo, we're going to adjourn our budget meeting at this time. And him and his staff will have a chance to go back and just go over a few of these numbers, just to double check. I've highlighted a few items, and so I trust that they'll be able to work with that. With that said, we do need to, probably sooner rather than later, come back to the table. So I guess I'll open it up for dates. How about instead of the Energy Futures Roadshow, we have a budget meeting? October 28th.
Yes, quarterly department reports, we can move that or something, huh? Have a budget meeting.
Well,
Or
that's an
before that.
evening one.
Okay, so,
I mean, yeah, I just actually booked a dentist appointment for that day, but I don't really want to go anyway, so it'll be a good reason to.
you should do, so you can't be,
Yeah, we could do the afternoon.
so if you go to dentist, you can talk or you can't talk?
It is 8:30 to 5, like it's all day, but we could go in the morning and then the Energy Futures Roadshow.
What's that?
28th, you'll be back.
We could also do the
Yeah, you'll be here.
29th, 31st, 1st.
The 31st?
It's Halloween. The week of the 28th to November 1st. I don't know what administration's calendar looks like at that time.
28th and 29th works for me.
You're gone that whole week, so you won't be here the 20. Hotlanta? You're not, when do you fly out?
I'll be back Friday night.
Okay.
Sunday to Friday.
Okay. Yeah, I don't actually care about Councillor Peeble's opinions anyway, so we will.
Double the opinions of the next.
So what, 29th? Do the afternoon of the 28th?
So start early and then do the department reports after.
Farrell suggested the evening. Do
It will go, but do we need to be there?
1 to 5 on
No,
October
exactly, right?
28th.
So we
that-
can,
Camila? The 1 to 5
28th, yeah.
on 28th? Does 1 to 5 on October 28th work for administration? All right. Sabina, if you want to send a calendar invite to everyone, that would be greatly appreciated. And I will adjourn our meeting at 2:38, and perhaps Council and Winston, if we want to have conversations, and Debbie, about the last couple of days, some of the presentations we've had, maybe that would be a good time to have those now. I don't know if we want to do it in the boardroom or not. Probably. Okay, we'll see you in the boardroom.